Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of Rediscovering God. I'm your host, Steve Eisenhower, joined with my good friend, Rabbi Stuart Federo again.
Hi.
And today we are going to discuss the major misconceptions that Christians have regarding Jewish law. And if, in fact, the Christian claim that the law could either be nullified or fulfilled holds water.
Oh, brother.
But first things first, everyone, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and give the Rabbi and I a big thumbs up, even if you don't like what we're doing.
All right.
And here we go.
Yep. So the first thing to do is to talk about what it means to, what's your word?
Nullify.
Nullify. To make invalidate. Okay. How does one make a law invalid? How does one make a law valid? How does one make a law valid? How does one say, here is the law? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm asking you a question.
Oh, you're right. How does one make a law invalid?
No, how does one make a law valid?
Well, in a court, or not a court system, but like a modern nation or something like that.
Exactly.
It goes before it has to be ratified by the government and so on and so forth.
So the government, even if the government is a king, the government says, here's the law. Okay. Mm-hmm. If it's a parliament, the parliament votes and says, here's the law. And by the way, God also says, here's the law. Mount Sinai. Hello. Okay. So then how does one invalidate a law? Does one invalidate the law by obeying the law? The only way a person can invalidate the law is if they're the king and they say, okay, it's no longer valid.
Yeah, it would have to be by that same power that validated it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or an equal power, which there is none with God, or a superior power, and there's nothing superior to God's power. So if God brings us all together at Mount Sinai and says, here's the law, then the only way God can, end that law, nullify the law, make it not valid anymore, is to bring us back to Mount Sinai and say, no more law. Here's the new law. Here's a different law. That old law doesn't work anymore. And by the way, when did that happen?
It didn't.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
Which, on top of that, makes me wonder if within that law, it states that, God cannot change his mind.
Yeah, funny thing about that. There's so many different misconceptions that Christianity has about law, about specifically biblical law, about specifically Jewish law, that we're going to take at least 2 or 3 sessions to get through all of it.
Right.
Okay. So, all right. So the first thing we have to look at is to understand that in the Christian's New Testament, you have a disagreement between Jesus on one hand and Paul on the other. Mm-hmm. Okay. In the Gospels, Matthew 20, let's take a look at Matthew 5. Okay. Think not that I have come to destroy the law or the prophets. I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say to you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till everything is fulfilled. Last I looked, heaven and earth are still here. So Jesus is saying that the law is still supposed to be followed.
Right.
Okay. Whosoever therefore shall break one of the least commandments and teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. By the way, notice in both instances, the one who says, the one who breaks the least commandment and teaches others to break the least commandment is still in heaven. He may be the least in the heaven, but he's still in heaven. Okay. Whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And here's an interesting line. Verse 20 of Matthew 5, for I say to you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. He's not, the Pharisees, who are the Pharisees? They're the precursors of the rabbis.
Mm-hmm.
The rabbis evolved from the Pharisees. So Jesus is saying here in Matthew 5:20, okay, your righteousness has to be even better than the Pharisees, or you ain't going to get into heaven. And the Pharisees became the rabbis, and so Jesus is talking to the Jews. He's not talking to the non-Jews. He's talking to the Jews. That's who he preached to. And he says, you got to follow the rabbis.
Right.
Okay, next thing. Matthew chapter 23, verses 1 to 3. Okay? Here, in Matthew 23, Jesus is validating the authority of the Pharisees. Right. Jesus is validating the authority of the group that became the rabbis. Then spoke Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you to observe, that observe and do. But do not do after their works, for they say and do not. In other words, their commandments, their laws, okay, you're supposed to observe even if they themselves don't follow them. So, and when it says that the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, what does that mean? Moses' seat is the seat of authority. If the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, Jesus is saying to the Jews that Moses and the Pharisees, which became the rabbis, have the authority.
Right.
Remember something.
If he himself had the authority, why didn't he say, I sit in Moses' seat? Listen to me.
Very true. But notice that Jesus is saying to observe the law. Mm-hmm. He's saying, I came not to destroy the law, but to do the law. Until heaven and earth pass away, nothing changes. And last I looked, as I said, heaven and earth are still here.
Right.
Okay. So even, and this is incredibly important to understand, the Hebrew scriptures are all about God's relationship to the Jews. Mm-hmm. Jesus was a Jew who was carrying on the tradition of discussing Jewish law for the Jews, not for the Gentiles. Right. It's only after Jesus with Paul that Paul went to the non-Jews, went to the Gentiles, went to the nations of the earth. When Jesus said in the Great Commission, according to Christianity, 27, 28, I can't remember, of the book of Matthew, he says, go to the nations. Who are the nations? What word would Jesus have used for the word nation? Goyim. Mm-hmm. The word goyim, plural, is nation or nations. And only after the destruction of the first temple, the word began to be used only to refer to the non-Jewish nations. So Jesus is saying at the end of Matthew, leave the Jews alone. Okay? I tried to get them on my side, but they're not listening. So now go to the Gentile nations.
Right.
Okay. But that's at the end of his story. Up until then, his interest is only in the Jews. I came only to the Jews, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Okay. He's not saying all the Jews are the lost sheep. He's saying he's out of all the Jews. He's only going to the lost sheep out of the house of the Jews. Okay. There are, in fact, 9. We're not going to get to all of them. We're probably not even going to get to half. There are 9 different misunderstandings that Christianity has about law and about Jewish law. We'll probably only get to a few today. Okay, the first one is that Jewish law is only about ritual. It's only about ritualistic stuff. It's only about doing rituals. Okay? Right. The second thing is the Jews add more and more laws to the Bible that are unnecessary and that are not divine. Third, that the purpose of Jewish law is to condemn those who don't obey them. The purpose of Jewish law is to condemn people because they can't keep them. 4, that Jews keep Jewish law in order to be justified, which means their guilt removed so that they can go to heaven. So we keep Jewish law to get to heaven. 5, that the Jewish laws are too many for one person to obey and that no one person can obey every single law. 6, that to break any one Jewish law is the same as breaking every other law, and to break one law is to break them all. Number 7, that the observance of or obedience to Jewish law is an all or nothing proposition. If you can't do it all, you can't do any. And then 8th, that Jewish laws become obsolete if one person can perfectly obey, perfectly fulfill that law or those laws. And then 9, that by punishing one person, another person's guilt for sins can be removed. So let's talk about the first few today, that Jewish laws are only about ritualistic stuff. And by the way, there are plenty of people who aren't Christian who might believe this too. There might be Jews. There might be Jews who don't understand, okay, and the Jewish law, that's only about ritualistic stuff, you know. Well, they'll say things like, well, I keep the ethical laws, just not the ritual. Well, how do you distinguish between the ritual and the ethical?
Right.
What if the ritual is to teach you the ethical? So, for example, the mezuzah on the doorpost. Okay, why do we put up the doorpost? Oh, it's a ritual. Well, maybe putting it up is a ritual, but what's the purpose and function of putting it up? That you will remember and keep my commandments and be holy to your God. Okay, the purpose of the mezuzah is to remind us to keep the commandments.
Right.
So if the commandments are ethical, even if it's a ritual, the ritual might be for the purpose and function to remind us to keep them. So how do you distinguish between ritual and ethical? I don't think you can. That's why we have to keep them all.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about this idea that Jewish law, biblical law, Torah law is only about ritualistic stuff. Let's take a look at Exodus chapter 21, verses 33 and 34. Exodus 21, verses 33 and 34. And if a man shall open a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit and not cover it, and an ass or ox falls in it, the owner of the pit shall make it good and give money to the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. What is this all about? Okay, in American civil law, if I'm walking along with my dog, and my dog goes into your lawn, and my dog falls into a hole in your lawn, and my dog breaks its leg in your hole in your lawn, who's responsible for my dog? You are, because you're responsible to maintain the safety of your property.
Right. Right.
Well, would you call that ritual? I wouldn't.
No, it's building codes.
It's lawsuit.
Yeah.
It's the law of lawsuit. In other words, if I
civil suit, reparations, that type of thing.
Exactly. And that's not ritual. Okay.
No, that's sociological. That's how you have a moral and upstanding
ethical
society. Right?
Absolutely. Okay. The one you're referring to is Deuteronomy 22, verse 8. Okay. Deuteronomy 22, verse 8. When you build a new house, that you shall make a fence for your roof, that you do not bring blood upon your house if any man falls from your roof. Okay. That's liability. That's building codes, like you were saying. Okay. That's not a ritual. And what the purpose of what I'm showing these for is to indicate that Jewish law, like any other law, biblical law, like any other society's law, are going to cover the exact same topics that are covered by any city, town, county, state, country. Okay, any society's laws are going to cover the same thing because the same issues come up between people in society.
For sure.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
I think a main point that needs to be hammered across is that Judaism is an ethno-religion.
I don't know what that means.
A religion and a nation. That's why you have like the.
We are a nation defined by our religion.
Right.
This will be our own topic for one show. We are a nation defined by our religion because it's our religion that determines that we're a nation. And God spoke to Abraham and said, I will make you a great ethnic group.
Right.
I will make you a great culture. I will make you a great family. I will make you no. God said to Abraham, I will make you a great nation.
Yeah.
And if nations have laws of citizenship,
Yep.
and nations have laws of naturalization to become a citizen of that nation.
Right.
And our naturalization process is called conversion to the religion of Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
So Judaism, I guess you could call whatever it means, because I'm still not clear. It's a religion derived from an ethnicity from the word ethnos, meaning nation. So it's kind of saying the same thing. But when people hear the word ethnic, they think bagels, okay, which are German. Okay, they think lox, which is Northern Europe. They think gefilte fish, which is poor man's food from Russia. Okay, so I get it. We are a nation because God said we're going to be a nation to Abraham in Genesis. And we are a religion, we're a nation defined by our religion because it's our religion that determines our nation.
Right.
And there's a whole history, biblical and otherwise, that shows this. But that's not our topic for now.
Right.
Okay. So the point is that the Jewish law is for the purpose, start over. That's not what I meant to say. Okay. Jewish law is not just ritual. It is also every other characteristic of law that you will find in any other society, whether it's laws of tort and lawsuit, or whether it's building codes, or whether it is safety instructions or whatever, because the same issues come up with Jewish society as it does with any other society.
Mm-hmm.
And for Christians to say, "Oh, it's just ritual," or less well-versed Jews, "Oh, it's just ritual," they haven't really picked up the Hebrew scriptures and read them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now there are in fact Jewish laws that regard Jewish rituals. Okay, but they're not totally exclusive between ritual and ethics, because the ritual law help us to understand and internalize the ethical.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't distinguish the two. Okay, next thing. Okay, they'll say, "Oh, the Jews add more laws to the Bible than are necessary, and those Jewish laws are man-made, they're religion of men, and they're not divine." Okay. Where in the United States Constitution does it say that one must drive a car at 20 miles an hour in a school zone?
I'm sure it's not there.
Why isn't it there?
Because it was a later edition. Cars didn't exist in the 1700s.
Exactly. Why would you expect the Constitution to talk about automobiles if they hadn't even been invented yet? Right. Therefore, when a new invention gets invented, okay, then you have to create new laws governing them, because it's a new experience, it's a new circumstance. New requirement is to have more laws. For example, crossing state lines. So right. that it's not in the U.S. Constitution.
Right.
But you got to create laws to govern the new experience, new invention, new experiences. Okay.
I heard a joke that kind of goes along with this. I think you'll like it.
Okay.
It goes, if you study the archaeological record, we can guarantee that they had cell phones back then.
Oh, yeah, how's that?
Because there's no landlines. So they had to have had cell phones.
That's very good. No landlines. They therefore had to have cell phones. Right. Okay, so the Jewish law, okay, is created because the same reason why you have automobile laws and going 20 miles an hour in a school zone. Mm-hmm. Because new circumstances, new inventions require you to have new laws governing them, but they are still going to be in consonance with the U.S. Constitution. I cannot have a law, okay, that has to do with driving that says everybody must go 20 miles an hour in a school zone unless, of course, you're white. Because that would violate the U.S. Constitution.
Right.
As it's evolved and developed over time. Well, if we come up with a new law, it has to be in consonance with the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bible still gives us the ethical and the moral and gives us the guidelines in which the new laws have to operate.
Right.
Okay. So
Right.
All right. So when a new invention comes along, they take the theories, the ideology, the ethics, the morals that are embedded in the Bible and apply them to the new circumstance, new invention, new what have you.
Right. I think a good example of that would be like medical practices.
Right.
Like it's not like the Jews are just making up brand new laws because new medical technologies come out. They're simply just assessing how medical practices align with the Torah, right?
Right.
So,
Exactly. So, and when they say, do not add or subtract, what's it talking about? It's not saying don't make new laws, because new circumstances come up. You have to make new laws. Okay. What it's talking about is don't add to the text of the Bible. And the biblical text has been pretty well set for, a couple of thousand years or more. Okay. 2,500, the point is that that's what it's talking about. It's not saying don't make new laws to cover new experiences, new needs. It's saying don't add to the biblical text. Okay. In the same way that you don't have every single law of the United States or any individual state found in the U.S. Constitution, okay, you have Congress that creates laws as they are needed, and you have each state's Congress or legislature, parliament, whatever, come up with new laws as they are needed by the new needs of society. Okay, all right. Let me give you an example. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 9. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 9. Okay? Now, we know this to be talking about the mezuzah. Okay? The thing that goes on the doorposts, right? But what does it say? Deuteronomy 6, 9. You shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. What's them? What are you supposed to write on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates? In order to make this real, we have to use our brains and try to understand what this refers to. Right. And so Judaism says that's what it's referring to. Judaism says that's what it's referring to. Now, if you want to come along and say, well, you didn't do that right, that's not the right interpretation, go right ahead, but don't call it Judaism. Right. Okay, Judaism is a very specific, Mount Sinai experience of the Jewish people. So you can come up with whatever you want, and you can tell us we're wrong, although we don't really care what you think. But don't tell us that we're wrong about our religion. Okay? The Bible never tells us what's supposed to be written in the mezuzah, what's written on the doorposts. So it requires us to think it out. This is why the oral law was developed, because not every verse in the Hebrew scriptures is perfectly clear on what it's demanding from us. Now, some will say, oh, well, it was just figurative. It's not real. Well, you can say that. Go right ahead. That's your religion, not ours. Okay? We've talked about this before, Steve, but you find the exact same thing in Christianity in the Christian New Testament, because every religion's verses are not always perfectly clear. When Christianity says baptize, okay, the description in the New Testament isn't there. Okay? All it says is that John the Baptist baptized Jesus and Jesus came up out of the water. It doesn't say that he fell backwards. Okay, it doesn't say even that he was totally submerged. That's only derived from interpretation, how they understand the word to baptize. But it never says that Jesus himself was fully covered in water. You could surmise that, but that's surmising, if that's a word, is an interpretation of the text. So every group has their own oral tradition of how they're going to understand any specific verse found in their own religion's literature. Same thing with Christianity.
Oh, okay? Certainly. Definitely. All
right. Okay. By the way, Acts chapter 16, verse 31. Acts chapter 16, verse 31. Okay. In Acts chapter 16, verse 31, Okay. And they said, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved and your household.
Mm.
So does that mean that if one person believes, his whole house can be saved? His whole house should be baptized if only one of them actually does the believing for them? Again, okay, verses are not always clear in every religion's religious text, and it requires human thought to think it out and to apply it to the real world, to make what's in there real. And so Judaism says, write them on the doorposts of your house, and comes up with a mezuzah and everything that goes in it. And Christianity says, be baptized, but it doesn't say how, so they come up with their systematic way of doing it.
Right.
Okay. All right. Matthew 3:16, and Jesus, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were open to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting upon him. It doesn't describe in Matthew 3:16 how Jesus was baptized, but every Christian denomination has their own explicit way of doing it. That's their oral tradition. That's their Talmud, so to speak.
Okay? Definitely.
All right. Next one. Christians say that the purpose of Jewish law is to condemn those who don't obey them. You know, I hear this from Christians and it just astounds me. That's like saying, why do we go 20 miles an hour in a school zone?
For safety purposes?
Oh, no, you're absolutely wrong. The whole purpose of going 20 miles an hour in a school zone is to show that eventually you're going to break the laws of going 20 miles in a school zone. That's what they say, Steve. That's what they say.
You're right. You're right.
Okay, they ignore that every law has a very specific reason for having created that law.
For sure.
Okay, when the city, town, county, state, whatever says go 20 in a 20 mile an hour school zone, it's not because they want you to please the judge by going 20. Okay, it's not because they want you eventually to realize eventually you're going to get a ticket because you're eventually going to go faster than 20 in a school zone. It's because, God forbid, if you go 20 miles an hour and hit somebody, you're less likely to hurt them than if you go 50.
For sure.
Okay. Well,
I was actually just having a conversation about this with a friend of mine.
Really?
And yeah, really. And it's sad because, for example, here in the United States, lots of laws, most of which are extremely ethical and make a lot of sense for a good, society. And Christians are all for that. But then when it comes to the law system of the Bible, the Torah, it's as if their common sense just goes away. You're
not kidding.
You know what I mean? That it's not similar. But if you look in the U.S., trying to think of when this was put in. I want to say it was under first President Bush. They actually added the Noachide code, the 7 laws of Noah, into U.S. government praxis.
Okay.
But I'm just saying what I'm saying is that it's as if as soon as you open the book up, all of a sudden these laws aren't meant for ethics. They're meant for something else. You know what I mean? It's like, it's almost as if common sense goes away when they open the book.
Because they think it's not involved with common sense, that it's not involved with ethics.
Right.
Okay. And we'll get to we'll get to that too, by the way. Okay. All right. Take a look at Romans chapter 3, verse 19 to 24. Okay, Romans chapter 3, 19 to 24. Now we know that what things soever the law says, it says to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. The purpose and function of the law is to make you feel guilty so you'll realize you need Jesus. Okay, the purpose and function of the law of going 20 miles an hour in a school zone is so eventually you'll know that you're guilty of speeding. Does that even make sense? Where do they get this from? I have no earthly idea where they get this from. Okay? All right. Take a look at Galatians chapter 3, verse 10 to 13. The purpose and function of the law is to come and curse you. Okay? The purpose and function of the law is to teach you that since you can't keep the law, that you're cursed by it, and therefore you need Jesus to save you from the curse of the law. Wow. God gives us a law for the specific purpose of cursing us, and then according to some forms of Christianity, only allows us to see Jesus as our Savior, and the rest of us, I guess, go to hell. So God brings us into the world and condemns us for not being able to see Jesus because he doesn't let us see Jesus. So we get cursed because God curses us or something. It doesn't make sense to me. Okay. Galatians chapter 3, 10 to 13. For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse, for it is written, cursed is everyone that continues not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. But that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God, it is evident, for the just shall live by faith, not by the law. And the law is not of faith, but the man that does them shall live in them. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone that hangs on a tree. Jesus became hang on a tree, therefore he became a curse, and by becoming a curse, he saved us from the curse of the law. Does that make sense to anybody? Okay.
No.
Okay. And by the way, it says that Jesus became a curse. A curse is something you do with your mouth. So is an exclamation. I give an exclamation with my mouth. Can somebody become an exclamation? I mean, it does, what sense does it make that somebody becomes a curse? You get cursed. I can curse you. You can curse me. But I don't become a curse. I get cursed.
Right.
Okay, so I don't, must be the veil over my mind that prevents me from seeing the truth of Christianity.
Right.
Okay.
Verse 12 explicitly, the law is not of faith. Does that mean that Moses didn't have faith?
When what?
After Sinai and forward, does that mean Moses had no faith?
I don't understand what you're saying.
So it says the law is not of faith. Basically, it's one or the other, right? You either have the law or you have faith. So Moses goes up.
Had no faith. He only had the law.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that what they're trying to insinuate? That Moses had no faith?
I
or
guess.
That Aaron had no faith? David had no faith?
I guess.
Hezekiah had no faith when he prayed the night before Sennacherib?
But it's only the faith that saves you, not obedience to the law. And what does he mean in 11? No man is justified by the law. To be justified means to be without sin. Okay, so what does that mean? We're keeping the law to be without sin? We're keeping the law to be justified? Somebody show me where in the world it says that the reason why we Jews obey the commandments God gave us at Mount Sinai was to be justified? I only need to be justified if I disobey the law.
Right.
Justified means my sin is taken away. I only sin when I break the law. See, that's a big difference between Christianity and Judaism. In Judaism, sin is something you do. In Christianity, sin is something you are. You are a sinner. And only because you are a sinner do you sin. In Judaism, you only become a sinner if you sin.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a sinner unless you sin. When you sin, there are ways to be forgiven for that sin.
Right. Exactly.
There's repentance, there's prayer, there's charity. Okay, we say that every high holiday season. So what is this nonsense about being justified by the law? Okay, I keep the laws of going 20 miles an hour in a school zone so that I will be forgiven for breaking the law? I don't need forgiveness for breaking the law until I break the law. I don't keep the law to be forgiven, to be justified. I keep the law because it's the right thing to do and it makes the world a better place. By the way, big question. Does anybody really want to drive in a city that has no laws at all of driving? No stop sign, no stoplight, no speed zone, no school zone. Just do what you want. Right. Is that really the kind of world you want to live in? So if the purpose and function of the law is merely to curse us, and not to make life better for us,
Right, exactly.
Okay, certainly you would prefer to live in a land that has no law. You know,
That's what I was getting at with that United States statement is, of course, all Christian countries around the world expect there to be a lawful nature to their society, right? But then all
right.
of a sudden, when it has to do with the Bible, nope, not for us. That's that's just to show us how sinful we are. It's just like use some common sense and apply it to your everyday surroundings too.
Yeah, but
And
Steve, they don't even apply it to the concept of the law. Nobody believes that the purpose and function of the law is to curse us. If it was a curse, you don't want to follow it.
right,
Okay, and there are plenty of people who will go 60 in a 50-mile-an-hour zone. They'll
hmm
go 80 in a 60-mile-an-hour, whatever. Okay, but are the police really going to pull you over if you go 80 in a 60? But if you go 65, if you go 61, you're breaking the law, but the police aren't going to pull you over. And I got news for you. God is far more compassionate, merciful, forgiving than a police officer.
right, right.
Okay.
That's another big point. Um, is that their conception of God in the Tanakh is that of a angry, lawful God that almost whose nature changes when the New Testament rolls around.
Right.
That's another main point here that goes right in tandem with this whole idea.
So let's keep moving because we're getting late. Okay. Galatians chapter 3, verse 23 to 25. Galatians chapter 3, verse 23 to 25. Okay. But before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto the faith which should afterwards be revealed. So keeping the law prevented us from understanding faith. And then it says, 24, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us to Christ, that we might be justified by faith. So the purpose and function, once again, that Paul is writing in Galatians 3, is that the purpose and function of the law is to be a schoolmaster to teach us we have to believe, and it doesn't matter how we act.
Wait. Whoever wrote Hebrews obviously didn't know what Galatians said, because this says before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto faith.
Right.
But Hebrews purports that Abraham was righteous by faith. So how could, which predates the, it's one big circus act. I hate to say it that way, but that's what the New Testament is. It's a circus act.
So, by the way, it's after the faith is come, we no longer are under a schoolmaster. So we no longer learn from the law how to behave because our faith is enough. Really? Have you ever taken a look at how many people are in jail? All we need is faith. Okay, well, what are they going to tell me? Oh, they're not real Christians. Okay, they're not real Christians. Okay, for every person who says they're a Christian, there's somebody else who says that the first person isn't really a Christian. And then for the second person, there's somebody else who says they're not a Christian. So I must therefore be convinced, because I have to believe everybody who tells me that someone else isn't a Christian, they're not really Christians. So there are no Christians in the world. How very convenient to be able to say that somebody who doesn't do something you like, well, they're not really a Christian, they're really a pilgrim. You may want to look up something called not a Scotsman fallacy. All Scotsmen like a certain food. Well, if so-and-so doesn't like the food, therefore he's not a real Scotsman. Well, he may have something else to say about that.
Right.
Okay, well, everybody tells me they're a Christian, but somebody else tells me they're not a Christian, so who am I supposed to believe?
Right.
Okay, well, I got news for you. They are still Christian, even if they're not acting like they're supposed to.
Exactly.
Okay, so their faith, how good did it do for them? Okay, and again, you want to live in a city where everybody drives by faith, or you want to live in a city where there are laws they have to obey?
Right.
Okay.
All right, let's do Deuteronomy 6:4-9, and then let's wrap it up. All right. And then we can press on next episode.
All right. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 through 9. Okay. What God does for the Jewish people is to give us the commandments. How do we show our love back to God? By keeping the commandments.
Right.
Okay. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 and following. Hear, O Israel, the eternal is our God, the eternal is one. Hey, everybody, listen up. There's only one God in the universe, and that's the God we believe in.
Yep.
And you shall love the eternal your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words which I command you this day are to be upon your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign upon your hand. They shall be for frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates.
Yep.
Okay. Judaism sees the law as central, as important, as elevating us, as important to our well-being. Christianity sees the law as secondary to faith. Okay? Doesn't matter how you act. It's only that you believe. I just saw a sign. Oh, Steve, I should send it to you. I took a picture of this sign in front of this church. Okay? And it's very, very informative. Okay? It's very informative. Okay? Christians aren't perfect, but they are guilty and forgiven. Christians aren't perfect, but they're guilty and forgiven. Well, if they're already forgiven for being guilty, what's the impetus for them to make themselves better? What's the impetus for them to perfect themselves if they're already perfect, even if they're guilty?
Right.
Okay, well, they're not perfect. They're just forgiven. So it doesn't matter if they're imperfect. They're already forgiven for their imperfections. There's no push. There's no drive for them to make themselves better, to perfect themselves, and to perfect the world in which they live. Yeah. All right. Okay. So Deuteronomy 6 tells us that the purpose and function of Jewish law is to obey God's commandments and to show we love God by obeying those commandments. And God is not stupid. He knows that if he gives us laws, he'll make our lives better off.
Right.
Again and again and again and again, I say, do you really want to live in a town that has no driving laws? You want to drive in a town that has no laws of driving? I think pretty much everybody I know would say, I don't want to drive in an area that has no laws for driving. Okay. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 4 through 5. Leviticus chapter 18, verses 4 through 5. Okay? My judgments shall you do, and my statutes shall you keep to walk therein. For I am the eternal your God. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the eternal. The purpose and function is for us to live in them. Not be cursed by them, but to have a better life as a result of, look, right. If a parent loves a child, do they say to the child, I love you, and that's all you have to do is love me back, now go do whatever you please? No. The parent who loves the child like God loves us says to us, there are limitations on your behavior. You got to do this, not that, and if you start doing something you're not supposed to do, you're going to get into trouble.
Right.
Because that's how we learn. That's how we teach our children.
Yep.
This is, God loves us, and therefore God gives us the commandments. 613 to be exact. We'll get to that further, when we do more of these.
Right.
Okay. This is okay. We got to stop there. But at any rate.
Yeah, we'll come back next time with Romans 3, and we'll.
Yeah, with Jews keep Jewish law in order to be justified, their guilt removed in order to go to heaven. Well, we kind of already discussed that, but
right.
All right. Okay.
All right, everyone.
Yep.
Rabbi Stuart Federer, author of Judaism and Christianity: A Contrast.
Yes. Ta-da.
Yep. Have a link to that and the Spanish version in the description of this video. Pick up a copy. Pick up both. Give one to a friend. Multiple other resources in the description as well.
Yep.
But yeah, guys, in conclusion, I'm Steve Eisenhower, Rabbi Stuart Federer. We will pick up with this next time. But until then, we'll see you on the other side, guys.